Okay, today we'll discuss one more important topic, that is the pancreas as well as the salivary glands. Okay, uh, in this lecture we'll discuss many important features of the location, parts, relations, and peritoneal reflections of the pancreas. What is this box? We should have known. Okay, then the blood supply, nerve supply, as well as the lymphatic drainage of the pancreas. Then we'll discuss all the details about the parotid, submandibular, as well as sublingual. Okay. Okay. So first will be the pancreas. Pancreas is a very special organ in the sense it is sitting horizontally in the abdomen. So it lies in the epigastrium. If you see here in this picture, so this is the region where you can trace it, just below the or behind the stomach. Okay, this is the site of the pancreas in the epigastrium, as well as the upper left quadrant of the abdomen. Mainly it is in the center epigastrium as well as to the left hypochondrium. Okay, so it is soft because it doesn't have any bone as such, so it is a fleshy or massy tissue structure here. So it will be soft without any bones, and it is lobulated, as well as elongated gland with both exocrine and endocrine functions. So it is a mixed gland with both the features of an exocrine as well as the endocrine features. Okay, so it is almost 6 to 10 inches in length. Total length will be almost 6 to 10 inches, and the weight is 60 to 100 grams in weight. And it is present behind the peritoneum, so it will be a retroperitoneal organ. So it is one of the retroperitoneal organ because it is present behind the peritoneum. Lies across the posterior abdominal wall in an oblique direction at the transpyloric plane, a plane passing through the pylorus. Pylorus is a part of the stomach, the last part of the stomach. So if you draw a horizontal line through that pylorus, that line is called as the transpyloric plane. It will pass like this. Okay. So this pancreas is at that level, that is the transpyloric plane at the level of L1 vertebra. Okay, and it is obliquely placed, almost horizontally or obliquely placed. Okay, so this is the pancreas. If you see, it has four parts: the head, which is sitting in the concavity of the duodenum. This is the head. Then we have a narrow part called a neck. Then we have a very long part, the major part, that is called as the body, and the last part towards the spleen. This is the spleen here. Near the spleen, this part will be called as the tail. So it has four parts: the head, neck, body, and the tail. Okay, so these are the four parts of the pancreas. The head, if you see the head, this is disc shape, lies within the duodenal cavity, as I said. So it lies, this is the duodenum. This is the first part, second part, third part, and the fourth part of duodenum. So this head lies within the concavity of the duodenum. It is related to second and third portions of the duodenum. As you can see here, it is mainly in contact with the second as well as the third part of the duodenum. Okay, it is continuous with the neck of the on the left side. If you see here, this head will continue, and there is a narrow part called as the neck. Okay, it is not such big, so it is a small part. Okay, which connects the head with the body. It includes, the head includes the uncinate process. If you see an extension coming from that, this whole thing is the head. Below that part, this part is called as the uncinate process. So it includes, the head includes the uncinate process part extending to the left behind the superior mesenteric vessels. If you see here, so these are the superior mesenteric artery, this is the superior mesenteric artery, this is the superior mesenteric vein. Okay, just behind that, a part extends from the head, that is called as the uncinate process. So it has a process that is called an uncinate process coming from the head. Then we have the neck. So this is the neck here. It is the constricted portion between the head and the body, which is connecting the head and the body, lies in front of the origin of the superior mesenteric artery beginning and the beginning of the portal vein. If you see here, just in front of the neck is present just in front of the superior mesenteric artery and the vein. The uncinated process is behind the superior mesenteric artery and vein, but the neck is in front of the superior mesenteric artery and the vein. As well as if you see the portal vein, here is the portal vein, so it is also in front of the portal vein. So this neck is a very important anatomical landmark, because you can trace, if you trace the neck of the pancreas, you can trace all these vessels, superior mesenteric artery and vein, as well as the portal vein. Or if you trace the portal vein as well as the superior mesenteric artery and vein, then you can trace the neck just in front of that. Okay, so this relation is very important. The superior mesenteric vessels emerge from its inferior border. As I said, it will be coming from the just below it, as well inferiorly. It will be the superior mesenteric artery and the veins. Now coming to the body, the larger part runs upwards and to the left. It is slightly oblique, so running upwards as well as towards the left side of the body. It is triangular in cross section. If you take a section, so it will be triangular. Later I will show you. If you see from the side, it looks triangular. It is not rounded, but it is triangular in shape. The splenic vein is embedded in its posterior surface. If you see behind, will be the splenic vein. So here is the splenic artery. On the superior border will be the superior mesenteric artery, but the splenic will be behind. So the superior mesenteric, the actually it is the splenic vein which is behind. Okay, so the superior mesenteric vein and the splenic vein will join to form the portal vein. So the splenic vein is behind here. Okay, so if you see from behind, then you can appreciate it. So the splenic vein is embedded in its posterior surface, while the splenic artery runs along its upper border. If you see here, this is the splenic artery. So it is running at the superior border or the upper border, and the splenic vein will be behind. Okay. Coming to the tail. Tail, this is a narrow, short segment ending at the splenic hilum. If you see here, as you know, the hilum is that part of any organ where the structures will be entering or coming out. So if you can see here, this is a splenic artery going, entering and dividing into multiple branches. And the splenic vein also comes out from this hilum. So at the same side, we can see the tail also. Okay. So it lies in a very important ligament called as the splenico-renal ligament, or it is also called as the lino-renal ligament. Lino-renal, splenico or linear. Both lineum means also the spleen. Okay, the splenico-renal ligament, or it is also called a lino-renal ligament. And this is very important clinically because it may get injured during splenectomy when you are doing the splenectomy. So at that time, if we cut the tail, as we know, the tail has the maximum number of islets of Langerhans, which will be secreting the insulin. So it leads to a condition called as induced diabetes. Okay, so surgical resection of this tail might lead to induced diabetes. Okay, it lies at the level of the T12 vertebra. Okay, so in front of the hilum of the spleen. So in front of the hilum of the spleen, you can see the tail. Anteriorly, it is related to the splenic flexure of the colon. Colon, as you have seen, colon will be running like this horizontally. The hepatic flexure is at just below the liver, and the splenic flexure is slightly higher than that of the hepatic flexure, and it will be in front here. Okay, so anteriorly it will be related to the splenic flexure of the colon. So these are the parts, and there are some important relations. Okay, coming to the anterior relation of the whole organ. So anteriorly, we can trace the stomach. So if you see here, there's the stomach here. So behind that is the pancreas. So it has been superimposed so that you can appreciate the organs. In the front will be the stomach, separated from the spleen by a sac called as lesser sac. Then we can see this is the transverse colon. This is the splenic flexure here. Then the transverse mesocolon. The transverse mesocolon is the peritoneal covering the transverse colon. Coming to the posterior relations, if you remove the spleen, this is the spleen here. If you remove, what are the structures which are behind it? Okay, one is the bile duct. If you see here, this is the bile duct coming from the liver. Then we have the portal vein. Here, if you see, this is the portal vein running blue. Okay, so portal. As you know, the portal vein is formed by the sphenocentric vein and the splenic vein. This is the splenic vein coming here, which is behind the pancreas, and this is the sphenocentric vein joined to form the portal vein. So you can trace this portal vein here, which is posterior. Then the splenic vein is also posterior. Then the inferior vena cava, just beside the aorta. If you see here, this is the aorta here. Beside that is the inferior vena cava. That is also there here. Okay. Then the aorta itself. Aorta here also can see. Here also can see the aorta is behind the pancreas. Here the pancreas has been shown, but here the pancreas is not shown. It will be present here. Okay. So here it is not shown so that you can appreciate the organs which are posteriorly. Then coming to the origin of the sphenocentric artery. Okay, if you see here, there is a sphenocentric artery coming here. Also, you can see this is the sphenocentric artery, which is the origin. So, origin of sphenocentric artery will also be posterior related. Then the left psoas muscle as well as the left adrenal. So, here is the psoas major muscle. So it will be the left psoas, which is posterior, as well as the left adrenal gland, the suprarenal gland, is the suprarenal gland or adrenal gland, as well as the left renal vessels. So if you see here, this or the spleen, the renal vein, renal artery, okay, left side. Then the left kidney also, because it is more towards the left side, so it is more related to these organs than the right. Then the hilum of the spleen also. If you see here, the spleen. So the hilum of the spleen, which is just behind the tail of the pancreas. So all these are structures which are posterior to the pancreas. These are the posterior structures. Okay, so these form the bed for the pancreas. Now coming to the pancreatic duct. If you see here, this is the pancreatic duct. So here also you can see there's a pancreatic duct. So the main duct is called as the duct of Wilson. Runs entire length of the pancreas beginning from the tail. So it starts from the tail, goes all the way up to the head. So if you see here, it is starting from the tail and going all the way. It receives many tributaries from the tail, body, neck, inferior portion of the head, and ancillary portion. If you see here, there are smaller ducts which are all draining into it. So there are so many short ducts which are all opening into the main pancreatic duct. Joins common bile duct and together they open into the hepatopancreatic ampulla. If you see here, so this is the common bile duct, this is the pancreatic duct. So both will join to form an ampulla, that is the large dilated portion that is called as the hepatopancreatic ampulla, or it is also called as ampulla of Vater in the duodenal wall, within the duodenal wall. The ampulla opens into the lumen of the duodenum by means of a papillae. So the ampulla opens into the lumen of the duodenum. Here, this is the duodenum. So into the lumen of the duodenum through a papillae called as the major duodenal papilla. This is the major duodenal papilla is the opening, and the ampulla is the dilated part where the two ducts meet. Then apart from the main pancreatic duct, there is also a duct called as accessory duct, smaller duct. This is called as the accessory pancreatic duct. Here also you can see this is the accessory duct, which is also called as the duct of Santironi, which drains the upper part of the head. So some part of the head will be drained by this accessory pancreas. This is additional. As you know, accessory means additional. It opens separately into the second portion of the duodenum at an opening called as the minor duodenal papilla. So this is opening in the major duodenal papillae. So because the accessory duct is a smaller duct, it opens with a smaller opening. This is called as the minor. Minor means smaller. Okay, minor duodenal papillae. Now coming to the blood supply of the pancreas. This is by the some two important arteries. One is from the celiac trunk and the superior artery. Why it is supplied by two arteries? Because you know the pancreas is coming from the second part of the duodenum where it is opening. Okay, so if you know the second part of duodenum is also developed has dual origin, because the part above it opening of this the major duodenal papillae, above that will be by the foregut, and below that is the midgut. So the artery of the foregut will be the celiac trunk, and the artery of the midgut will be superior artery. So because it is coming from the junction, so it is supplied by both the arteries. So celiac trunk as well as superior. So this pancreas is supplied by both the arteries. So the artery supplies by the celiac trunk, the branch of the celiac trunk. Here is the celiac trunk, branch of the celiac, that is the superior pancreatic or duodenal artery. From see here, if you see, so this will be the superior pancreatic or duodenal artery. Okay. Then from the superior mesenteric, this is the superior mesenteric artery, which is coming from below the superior mesenteric artery will be behind as well as below the neck. From there, a branch is coming that is called as the inferior pancreatic or duodenal artery. Inferior pancreatic. So these are the two arteries which will be supplying the mainly the head as well as the neck part. And the body and the tail are supplied by the the splenic artery through its 8 to 10 branch. If you see here, so this is the splenic artery, which is supplying the spleen mainly, but also it will be giving multiple branches to the body as well as tail. Okay, so these three arteries will be supplying most of the pancreas. Head is supplied by superior and inferior pancreatoduodenal artery, and the body is supplied by the splenic artery, which is also coming from the celiac trunk. Okay, splenic artery. Then coming to the veins. So the head and neck are drained by the similar veins as that of the artery. The names are similar. Drained by the anterior and posterior venous arcade that form the superior and inferior pancreaticoduodenal veins. Pancreaticoduodenal arteries here, and similarly we have the veins together. These are called as the superior as well as the inferior pancreaticoduodenal veins. This is the superior and this is the vein inferior, which will drain to the corresponding vein. The superior will be draining into the portal vein, and inferior will be draining into the superior mesenteric vein. Body and the tail are drained by the splenic vein. Splenic vein, which is behind the pancreas, so that will be draining the body and the tail. Okay, which is a tributary of the portal. This splenic vein will go join with the superior mesenteric vein to form the portal vein. So this splenic vein is a tributary of the portal vein. So the head and neck are drained by the superior and inferior pancreatic or duodenal veins, and the body and tail will be drained by the splenic vein. Okay, so the arteries and veins are very similar in terms of names. Now coming to the lymphatic drain. Here you can see here is the pancreas. This is the superior mesenteric artery. Okay, and here is the superior pancreaticoduodenal, and here is the inferior pancreaticoduodenal arteries. Okay. Now coming to the lymphatic drainage. So it is a rich network that drains into the pyloric, hepatic as well as the splenic nodes. So splenic nodes are here, hepatic nodes are here, as well as the pyloric nodes are here. So it will drain into all these, and ultimately they will be all draining into the cilia group. A cilia group of lymph nodes are here around the celiac artery or the celiac group. Okay, as well as even the superior mesenteric lymph nodes. If you see here, this is the superior mesenteric, and these are the group of lymph nodes. These are called as the superior mesenteric group of lymph nodes. Okay. Okay. So this is about the lymphatic system. Now coming to the innervation. So it is supplied by the autonomic nervous system. So it has both the sympathetic as well as the parasympathetic component. The sympathetic fibers will be coming from the thoracic splanchnic nerves, and the function will be the sympathetic fibers have an inhibitory effect. So whenever these sympathetic fibers are stimulated, there will be decrease in the production as well as secretion from the pancreas. The parasympathetic fibers are from the vagus. So whenever these are stimulated, both the exocrine and the endocrine part will be start secreting. The exocrine part will be secreting the required juices, and the endocrine part will be secreting the hormones. Now coming to the next organ, that is the salivary glands. Salivary glands are exocrine because they will have ducts, so they are not endocrine, they are exocrine glands. But the pancreas, as we said, it is both exocrine and endocrine. So that part of the exocrine and endocrine part we will study more in histology as well as the physiology. We will not go into details about what are the secretions, which part, everything. Okay. Coming to the salivary glands, they are exocrine glands because they have duct that produce the saliva. They are present around the oral cavity and they produce the saliva. There are three large named pair of salivary glands. So there are three glands here. If you see this picture show, all three are multiple minute unnamed glands in the submucosa of the oral cavity, lip, palate, and the surface of the tongue. So they are initially minute glands, multiple glands joined together to form the masses here. So the salivary glands are divided into three: the parotid, submandibular, as well as the sublingual. As you can see here in this picture, this is the large gland. This is called as the parotid. This is the submandibular gland, and this is sublingual. Sublingual, sub means below, lingula means tongue. So below the tongue, so this is the sublingual. Submandibular, below the mandible, so this is called submandibular, and this is the parotid. So the parotid produces the serous and watery secretions. So they are duct glands or exocrine gland. So they will be producing the serous. The parotid is mainly serous secreting gland. So again, the secretions are of different types: serous, mucus, as well as the mixed type. So this parotid gland will be secreting mainly, it is serous gland. So it will be secreting the serous secretions, and watery, serous or watery, and this is the duct through which it will be opening into the mouth. Then we have the submandibular gland. This is the submandibular, below the mandible, produces a mixed serous and mucus secretion. So this submandibular gland is a mixed gland. So it is not mixed gland, means not exocrine endocrine part, but it is the mixed type of secretion, that is serous and mucus. So this mixed gland, submandibular gland, is totally different from the pancreas, which is also a mixed gland, but it includes the exocrine and endocrine part. Here it is the exocrine part, but the type of secretion is two types, serous as well as mucus. So it is called as a mixed gland. Then we have the third gland. This is the sublingual gland, which secretes the saliva, which is predominantly mucus in nature. So the saliva, the sublingual gland is mucus, the parotid is serous, and the submandibular is mixed. Now some more details about the parotid gland. This is the largest of the three salivary glands, as we can see with the size, formed entirely of the serous acini because it is serous secreting, as we saw. And the position is, it is wedged between the anterior and posterior structures. Anteriorly, we have the submandibular ramus and the masseter muscle, and posteriorly we have the, let me show you the picture. Okay. So anteriorly, we have the ramus, mandibular ramus. Ramus is the bony part of the mandible, and the masseter muscle. Here you can see here, this is the masseter muscle. Okay. So this is present anterior, the parotid gland is present anterior to the mandible as well as the masseter, and posterior to the mastoid process. Here is the mastoid process, and the sternocleidomastoid. This is the sternocleidomastoid. Okay. So these are the structures anteriorly and posteriorly. Okay. Then the if you see, it is triangular in shape. Okay, with the apex behind the mandibular angle. If you see here, the apex is below, even though it is triangular in shape. The base here on the top and the apex is below. Okay, so it is a reverse triangle. So the apex is behind the the mandibular angle. Mandibular angle is between the ramus and the body. That is called as the angulation bent here. So the apex is present at the angle of the mandible, Base is directed upwards, as I showed before. This is the base upward just below the zygomatic arch. Here is the zygomatic arch present, the bony part. Okay, so it is present just below the zygomatic arch and in front of the external auditory meatus as well as the TM joint. External auditory meatus is the opening in the ear, and the TM joint is the joint between the mandible and the temporal bone. Okay, so that is called as the temporomandibular joint or TM joint. Okay, so these are some of the important relations. Then we have the parotid gland also has an accessory part and an additional part. If you see here, this is the accessory part, a small part that is separated from the main gland. So this is the main gland and a part is separated. This will be called as the accessory part. So if you cut and see this gland has a capsule from outside. The whole gland is covered by a thick capsule, which has two capsules actually. Okay, the outer as well as the inner. The outer one is derived from the deep cervical fascia. So it is nothing but the extension of the fascia. So in the neck, there is a special fascia called as the deep cervical fascia. So the capsule formed here will be the deep cervical fascia. If you see here, the facial capsule. Okay, then deep inside is the fibrous capsule. So the outer will be tight derived from the deep cervical fascia, and the inner one is the connective tissue capsule. So the inner one is the connective tissue capsule. The gland is divided into superficial and deep parts by the facial nerve fibers. So if you see, the facial nerve will be passing through the gland. Okay, so this is the facial nerve here. So it will be passing through the gland. So the part which is superficial to it will be called as the superficial part. The part which is deep to that facial nerve will be called as the deep part. So the facial nerve which is passing through this is dividing the gland to superficial and deep. So this is a very important relation that the facial nerve is passing through the parotid gland. So if you want to remove the parotid gland, should be very careful to keep the facial nerve intact. If not, there will be Bell's palsy on the face. Okay, so when you are removing the parotid gland, you should try to avoid cutting the damaging the facial nerve because it is passing through the gland. Now, opening of this parotid gland. Parotid gland has a duct as we saw before. Okay, so if you see here, this is the parotid duct coming from the gland from the anterior margin and opening into the oral cavity. Where it opens, so this is the site where it opens. So through a papillae called as the parotid papillae with the opening of the parotid duct. So where is it present? It opens into the vestibule of the mouth. What is vestibule? Between the teeth and the gums. This space is called a vestibule. Between the teeth and the teeth and gums and laterally with the cheek. In between this small space called as the vestibule. This is called as oral cavity proper and this is called a vestibule. So this parotid duct will be opening into the vestibule of the mouth on a small papilla. So this opening is the papillae. Opposite the second upper molar tooth. So just behind the second upper molar tooth, this is the opening on either side, both the sides. Okay, upper second molar tooth will be the opening of the parotid duct. So what are the structures within this parotid gland? As we saw, the facial nerve is passing through it, but there are also some important structures apart from the facial nerve. Okay, so what are the structures which are passing through the parotid gland? This is important during surgeries because we have to save the structures when we are doing the surgery on the parotid gland. So some from superficial to deep, the first structure is, as we saw, is the facial nerve, which will divide the gland into superficial and deep part. Then it is the most superficial structure. It divides the gland into superficial and deep part. Then we have the retromandibular vein. There is a vein passing through it. So this is called as the retromandibular vein, which is intermediate in position, formed by the union of the maxillary and superficial temporal vein. So the superficial temporal vein will be coming from the temple and the maxillary vein coming from deep. So both will join to form the retromandibular vein. Then before it leaves, the gland is divided into anterior and posterior branches. Okay. And then we have the external carotid artery, which is also passing through this gland. So they are very important. There is a nerve, a vein, and an artery, which are all passing through the parotid gland. So doing surgery, even though the parotid gland is very superficial, easily it can be done, but there are very important structures passing through it. The nerve is the facial nerve, the artery is the external carotid artery, and the vein is the retromandibular vein. The external carotid artery divides is deep. It is divided into the maxillary and superficial temporal arteries. So it will divide into two this external carotid artery will give the two terminal branches. One is called the maxillary, which will go in deep inside, and the superficial temporal vein. Then these are some of the important structures which are there: facial nerve, retromandibular vein, as well as the external carotid artery. So now here you can see again, you can appreciate the facial nerve passing through this is the parotid gland. So this facial nerve will be giving 5 branches, as you know. So 2 branches before it enters the gland. So the facial nerve, when it enters, it will be giving 2 branches. Then it will divide to 5 branches, which are those within the parotid gland. One is the temporal. The first branch will be the temporal, like this. If you keep the hand on the face, then these 5 fingers will indicate 5 branches. The first one is the superficial. These are the superficial. Then we have the zygomatic. These are the zygomatic branches like this going on the face. Then we have the buccal branches going toward the oral cavity. So these are the buccal branches, yellow colored, so which are going towards the oral cavity. Then we have the mandibular branches going towards the mandible, if you see here. So like the mandible. Then we have the cervical branches going into the neck. So these are the cervical branch. So these are the 5 branches coming from the facial nerve. So you should be very careful to save this nerve if you are doing any surgeries on the parotid gland. So these 5 fingers indicate the 5 branches of the facial nerve. So the innervation of the parotid gland is again both by the autonomic nervous system. So it is by the both parasympathetic and sympathetic. Parasympathetic is from the inferior salivary nucleus. Inferior salivary nucleus. Okay. So this from the inferior salivary nucleus, from the brain it will coming. The tympanic nerve will come here, if you see here. So this is the tympanic nerve coming from the inferior salivary nucleus within the brain stem. So the tympanic nerve through the glossopharyngeal nerve. So it will coming as tympanic nerve through the glossopharyngeal nerve to the tympanic plexus, lesser protrusion to the otic ganglion. So it will pass through the lesser protrusion nerve. So this is the lesser protrusion nerve, and from there to the otic ganglion. So otic ganglion has a very important role in case of the secretion of the parotid gland. The postganglion fibers running in the auriculotemporal nerve. So they relay here. These are the preganglion fibers. Now in the otic ganglion, they relay to the postganglion fibers. From there, it will pass to the auriculotemporal nerve to supply the gland itself. So this is about the parasympathetic. Sympathetic is from the plexus around the external carotid artery. So the sympathetic will be coming from the external carotid artery. Now coming to the blood supplied by the external carotid artery. If you see here, so this is the common carotid artery dividing into external and internal. So this is the external carotid artery entering all the way gives rise to the maxillary as well as the superficial temporal. Similarly, if you see here, this is the superficial temporal vein and the maxillary vein will join here to form the retromandibular vein here. Okay, so the artery is by the external carotid artery and its branches, external carotid artery as well as its branches. Venous drainage by the retromandibular vein. This is the retromandibular vein, and the lymphatic will be parotid and deep cervical lymph nodes. There will be group of lymph nodes near the parotid. Those are parotid. Then all the lymph nodes will drain into finally to the deep cervical group of lymph nodes. Now coming to the next gland, salivary gland, that is the submandibular salivary gland. So submandibular, as the name indicates, it is below the mandible here, bone. Below that will be the submandibular gland. Okay. and its duct. If you can see here, this is the duct, parotid gland and its duct here, and the submandibular gland and its duct. Okay, which is called as the Wharton's duct. We'll study. So it is located deep to the body of the mandible. It is present deep, not superficial. Okay, so it is not, this is just to show you how the gland is present, but it is present deep to the mandible. So you can see here. So this is the gland here. Superficial. It also has a superficial and deep part. Superficial will be outside this muscle, and this is the deep part coming inside. Okay. So here also you can see this is the deep part and here is the superficial part. So this muscle is the hyoglossus. Okay. So this is the muscle hyoglossus will divided into superficial and deep part. And here this is the duct of the submandibular gland. So here is the duct of the submandibular gland. This is the side view. This is the back view, posterior view. So it has two parts, superficial and deep. The superficial will be larger and the deep part is smaller. As you can see here, that deep part is small, the superficial much more larger. And this is the duct. So this is the gland here. This is the superficial part, the deep part of the submandibular gland, and this is the duct going all the way and opening into the floor of the oral cavity. The duct emerges from the deep part of the gland, as you can see in the picture. It passes forwards along the side of the tongue under the mucous membrane of the floor of the mouth, and it is crossed laterally by the lingual nerve. So a very important relation with the nerve is the lingual nerve, which is supplying the tongue. So there is a lingual nerve, which is lateral to the duct. It opens on the summit of the small sublingual papilla, which lies at the side of the frenula of the tongue. So if you see here, here is the opening of the duct just beside the frenulum. Frenulum is at the center. Beside the frenulum will be opening of this duct. So clinically, it is important to remember that the submandibular duct can be palpated through the floor or along the alongside the tongue. If you want to trace it, if you want to see if there are any stones within this duct, then you can put the finger below the tongue and try to feel this submandibular duct. Saliva can be usually seen emerging from the orifice of the duct. If it is intact and everything is normal, then you can see the saliva coming from it. So, but it is prone for callus formation. Okay, that's why the palpating this duct becomes important. If you see here, so a small calcified stone blocking the salivary duct is visible as a yellowish mass. So if you see here, this is circled in the center of the mouth. So this is indicating the callus formation. Okay, this is because the callus formation is common in case of the submandibular duct because it has to drain against the gravity. If you see, the duct is draining against the gravity. The submandibular duct is a common site of callus formation. The presence of a tense swelling below the body of the mandible, which is the greatest before or during a meal and is reduced in size or absent between the meals, is a condition of the diagnostic condition. So if this duct, this swelling becomes more intense during swallowing of the food, because whenever the food comes, there will be secretion from the salivary glands. So it indicates that there is a callus formation. Examination of the floor of the mouth will reveal the absence of the ejection of the saliva. Normally we said if it is intact, then there will be secretion of saliva. But if this is blocked, then you can see the absence of the ejection of the saliva from the orifice of the duct. Frequently, the stone can be palpated in the duct which lies below the mucous membrane. So if you put the finger on the floor of the oral cavity and try to feel if there is a callus formation, then you can easily feel the callus. Now coming to the third and the last gland, that is the sublingual gland, which is below the tongue. So that's what is called a sublingual. Location, this is the smallest of the three. The parotid is largest and the smallest will be the sublingual. Okay. So it lies below the mucous membrane of the floor of the mouth close to the midline. So it is present in the midline, just beside the midline. close to the oral cavity floor. Okay. So if you see here, this is the sublingual papilla, and here is the sublingual uh, fold, which is like so. If you see here, so the papillae are here, and here will be the gland overlying the mucous. Mucous membrane is above. Okay, and if you try to feel, so here you can feel the subglandular gland, the sublingual. Sorry, okay. And the opening of the submandibular duct is here. Just beside the frenulum will be this is the frenulum. Just beside that will be the opening of the submandibular duct, and sublingual will be beside the frenulum. So the sublingual duct are 8 to 20 in number. The opening for the sublingual is not by a single duct, but it is multiple small openings. Okay. Most open into the summit of the sublingual fold, but a few opens into the submandibular duct itself directly. Coming to the arterial supply, it is by the facial artery. So the same artery, if you see here, is the facial artery. Okay, which will be supplying both the submandibular as well as sublingual. The facial vein is the main vein. So this is the facial vein here beside the facial artery. Then the lymph drainage, it will be into the submandibular group of lymph nodes, both for the submandibular as well as sublingual gland. It will be draining into the submandibular lymph nodes and finally into the deep cervical lymph nodes. Now coming to the nerve supply. So again, it is also has a parasympathetic and sympathetic component. The parasympathetic will be secretomotor. So whenever they are stimulated, it leads to secretion. This will be coming from the superior salivary nucleus of the facial nerve. So it will be the similar to that of the origin of the facial nerve from the superior salivary nucleus. So here is the facial nerve. Okay. Okay, the submandibular ganglion via the chorda tympani as well as the lingual nerve. So if you see here, so here this is the lingual nerve. Okay. So here this will be the lingual nerve, and here is the chorda tympani. Okay, the fibers pass through the submandibular ganglion via the chorda tympanic branches and then through the lingual nerve. Okay. The postganglion fibers, so the submandibular gland, the ganglion is here. The postganglion fiber, they will relay here. The postganglion fibers will pass, so reach the submandibular gland as well as both the sublingual and submandibular. Okay, either directly or along the duct. If you see here, this is the ganglion, submandibular ganglion. Here they relay. The postganglion fibers will go to the both submandibular as well as the sublingual gland. Okay. So this is all about the pancreas, then the parotid, submandibular as well as the sublingual glands. So if you have any questions regarding this, you can ask me now.
Thank you, Doctor.